Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. It's the same people who attend class every morning. You're all very regular, regulated, with your ears out, antenna up. In Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2, in discussing Chindanti Kovidas Tasya, just the hearing this morning, Prabhupada was saying the Anusyadina, the sword that can cut the knot of material attachment, is awarded to someone who has eagerness. He was using the word appreciation, ramp it up a bit in his eagerness for hearing. That's faith, appreciation for hearing. And by that hearing process, voila, the sword of detachment is in your hand, at least the potential. So without detachment, can you make progress? Then what is detachment? So our discussion this morning is the third day on discussing the same text 16 from chapter 9 of Uddhava Gita. And the going is a little rough because it's just philosophy and it's some terminology that we're not perhaps accustomed to hearing. So I'll go through it. There's 2 more pages. But those of you that are hearing, it's not just information, it's knowledge and detachment by the hearing process, so that your attachment to Krishna becomes opened. The emphasis Prabhupada was explaining is get to the stage of ruchi. But before you get to the stage of ruchi, you have to deal with the ruchi for the impermanent. And that's the sort of detachment. A little before we begin, this is Jiva Goswami explaining Sambandha Gyan in relation to the form of Paramatma and the form of Paramatma in relation to the universal creation, because that's what this verse is speaking about. The Avaduta Brahman is speaking about the universe in which we live and how to properly understand it. Okay, so I'm going to read a text, a really nice place, very well done, very reasonably easy to follow, is an explanation of what we're discussing from the point of view of Madhvacharya. Those of you that like to learn, Madhvacharya's 9 pillars. It's Hari Parshad Prabhu giving a 3-part seminar to some audience, and it's recorded. The 3 pillars of Madhvacharya's teaching, something like that is the title. And that very example given yesterday, worth repeating, the potter, the potter's wheel, and the clay. There's a nice image. And the clay is the upadan, cause. And there's the instrumental cause, showing the pots and the potter's wheel and the instruments he uses, and then the potter. Those are nimitta category. And then there's the upadan category. So that's creation. There's the intermenstrual cause, and there's the clay. You know, you can say um, that which becomes transformed, upadan, that which becomes transformed. And there's the remote cause above all. So what's the relationship? That's the topic. And he, the Avadhuta Brahmana, is giving clarity as to these different causes and the effect, the universe, and then the withdrawal of the universe and how that happens. And when you have a clear understanding, you have detachment from that which is temporary. You have at least the doors open for attachment to the cause, remote cause, the ultimate cause, because even Paramatma is an expansion of Krishna. So here's the verse, and we'll have 2 pages of philosophy from Paramatma Sandarbha. The Lord of the universe, Narayana, is the worshipable God of all living entities. This is text 16. Without extraneous assistance, the Lord creates this universe by his own potency, and at the time of annihilation, the Lord destroys the universe through his personal expansion of time and withdraws all of the cosmos, including all the conditioned living entities, within himself. Thus, his unlimited, capital S, self, is the shelter and reservoir of all potencies. The subtle pradhan, that's the clay, the basis of all cosmic manifestation, is conserved within the Lord and is in this way not different from him. In the aftermath of annihilation, the Lord stands alone. So now comes our continuation from Paramatma Sandarbha. Commentary reads, thinking of you, the source, or param, of every one, are just the opposite, and that another jiva is the original Atma, followers of Sankhya and others search for the Atma externally. Having gained a foothold by this, Maya produces the mistaken idea that the body is the Atma. This is loss of all knowledge by ignorance. Right? Ignorance covers the jiva. And that's one of the features, special brand of ignorance covering the jiva. I'll read it again. Thinking that you, the source of everyone, are just the opposite, that is, you are from everything. The Lord, impersonalists, Sankhya philosophers think the Lord is the product of Prakriti. And that another jiva is the original Atma, followers of Sankhya and others search for the Atma externally. Having gained a foothold by this, Maya produces the mistaken idea that the body is the Atma. This is loss of all knowledge by ignorance. Then he quotes Canto 6, Chapter 4, text 25. The body, life, air, senses, internal senses, gross elements, and sense objects do not know themselves or other things or the jiva. The jiva knows all of these items and the gunas which cause them. He also can know Paramatma, but does not really know the omniscient Lord. I worship that Lord with infinite qualities. Then again, later in Uddhava Gita, another chapter 22 verse, those who do not know Paramatma, who are fixed in goals other than me, engage in arguments concerning the reality and unreality of the world and do not cease to argue. Though they achieve no results, they have turned their thoughts from me, the Lord, who gives regard only to the devotees. Okay, so now some more philosophy. There's this word parinama. Parinama means transformation. According to the acharyas, the philosophy of Vyasadeva is Shakti Parinamavad. That is, there's the Lord who has Shaktis, and all he does, or the varieties of spiritual and material realm, are just transformations of his potencies. There's him and his potencies and transformations of his potencies. Shakti Parinama Vad. All variegatedness is nothing but the transformation of his potencies. So it should be understood that transformation, parinama, is the conclusion of Bhagavatam. Since vivarta, now we discussed this yesterday, so a little reminder. Yeah, by the way, this little seminar by Hari Parshad, he drills down on what does it mean, vivarta? What does it mean, mithya? The world is false. What does it mean? Can it mean this or this or this? Then the definition is given, and Madhvacharya refutes it, at least their understanding. So, what's the proper understanding of vivarta? Vivarta means world is illusion. It's quite similar to, but different from what we're used to, and what we're used to is upadi. Like, I'm American, then that's an upadi. Or somebody else is a man or a woman or a something, 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 smart or not so smart, or wealthy or not so wealthy. And all those are upadis. You know, a tree, a bird, those are upadis. And that's it, you know, a designation. Then, so related, so thinking that upadi or that designation is the entity, then vivarta means the world or anything is not what you think it is. It's an illusion. All it is an upadi covering Brahman. And to think that upadi covering Brahman, to think otherwise is vivarta, illusion. And illusion covers reality. That's their idea. That's the Mayavad idea. Now there's a Vaishnav idea of that word vivarta. Since vivarta, a world is illusion, is a secondary feature propounded by the section on jnana, that is, so within the Bhagavatam, there's a section on jnana, where this whole discussion, this part of Uddhava Gita is jnana. Now, it's jnana connected to bhakti, so it takes on a different dimension. But if you leave the bhakti dimension out, or diminish the bhakti dimension, then it's vivarta in as a secondary feature. Vivarta is the world is illusion is a secondary feature because it's real, but it's temporary. But its temporary part is secondary. What's primary? The Lord is the source of everything, and everything is a transformation of energies, and therefore the world is real. So we can't say vivarta, the world is illusion, in the sense of it just doesn't exist, because illusion doesn't exist. And that comes into, so what is mithya, jagat mithya? What does that mean? What do they mean when they say that? They mean literally it just doesn't exist. Really? So Vaishnavas say it exists, but Vivarta in a different sense. It's temporary. It's a transformation of Shaktis, Shakti Parinama. That's the Bhagavatam's teaching. Since transformation is the chief feature in the section presenting the author's viewpoint, the author is Vyas, and since Parinama attains even greater strength by agreeing with both sections. What's both sections? The Bhakti section and the Gyan section. Strength and strength. So therefore, the proper understanding, this Parinam is for the purpose of revealing the inconceivable powers of the Lord. Remember, Jiva Goswami is explaining our verse, this chapter 9, text 16 verse. How when we unpack it, what does it look like? What are the various threads that hold together the verse? Stating that the universe is illusory is for the purpose of showing that one should meditate on the Lord, since the universe is temporary and extrinsic to the Lord. Remember that statement we heard yesterday, that the universal form in both its subtle and gross features are created by Maya. That's extrinsic. It is not meant that stating the universe is illusory is not meant to show that the universe is false, and not for the purpose of showing that the Lord and the Jiva are the same. Swarup, quoting Vedanta Sutra, Vaidharmyach cha na swapna divat. One cannot claim that external objects are only cognitions, as in a dream, since there is difference in the dream object and the object of waking perception. Right? I can dream about a chair and I can sit in the chair, and it's not the same. I mean, there's some resemblance, but it's not the same. Similarly, right in the Vedanta Sutra, you can't call this world as literally absolutely false. Jagat Mithya. Okay. Thus it is said in Narada Purana, quote, it is said that by remembering the Lord, one destroys attachment to the universe. But by remembering the universe, one does not destroy the attachment. Oh. So when we think of the universe, we should think of the universe in relation to its source. And we think of it in relation to its source, illusory attachment is gone. But if we simply think about the universe, the attachment isn't gone. And that summarizes these three chapters. 7, 8, and 9 are the Avadutta Brahmana teaching King Yadu how he got to the place of detachment. And, he had different gurus. Now comes the conclusion. With that detachment, he now has the conclusion. There's a source of everything. And with that source of everything, I'm detached. I'm moving about in the world, but I'm not attached. I'm giving teachings about the temporariness as I'm moving about, because people are suffering because of the attachment. So they need gurus that teach them detachment, and they need to then come to the conclusion of what's the source of everything, and then it's finished. Illusion can't stand. Where there's light, darkness can't stand. In the main explanations about creation, within the Bhagavatam, there are various sections about creation. In the main explanations about creation, the conclusion is that it takes place by transformation of pradhan. That's the clay example again. What's the creation? It's transformations of Pradhan. Then it goes by different names depending upon what's the stage of making the clay pot. You can call it Prakriti, you can call it Mahatattva, you can call it the three modes, you can call it different, the different features. But one way to describe it's just transformations of Pradhan. Here's from Canto 3, Chapter 5. Again, it's about creation. Bhagavan, the Lord of Mahavaikuntha, is his Sangsha expansion as the Purusha, full of potency, at a certain moment of time, placed the jivas into Maya, which became agitated by the gunas, process of creation. So there's the potter, and then there's the clay, and then there's the wheel and the instruments, and moving the wheel, because that's one of the things that the potter does. That's the time energy. The time energy moves everything. That's the next verse. Impelled by time from the invisible Prakriti, Pradhan, arose Mahatattva composed of knowledge in Sattvaguna. This manifests the universe situated within itself and destroys ignorance. Thank God for it, knowledge, because it destroys ignorance. The Lord at Hoksaja, through his portion who glances at Prakriti, places the Atma in Prakriti, made of the gunas by Maya, having the function of time. Maya having the function of time. Made of the gunas, made by Maya having the function of time. Kala Vritya. So that's the Bhagavatam. Now here's Vedanta Sutra saying the same thing. Hantemas Tisro Devata. The Lord entered the three Devatas with the Jiva and divided name and form, Chandogya. Mahatattva composed of knowledge, Vijnanatma. Mahatattva composed of knowledge, because that was explained from chapter 5 of Canto 3. Mahatattva composed of knowledge dispels the ignorance of pralaya, destruction. Then continuing on with Paramatma Sadarbha, the next Anuchade is text 59. Anuchade 59. Just a few paragraphs. The one form of Vishnu withdrew the universe previously created by his Maya through his time Shakti at the end of Brahma's life and remained alone, the support of himself and shelter of all his Shaktis. When he brought his energies, such as Sattva, to equilibrium by his powerful energy of time, the Lord, who enjoys in himself, who is the controller of Prakriti and the Jivas, who is worshipped by liberated and conditioned Jivas, remained in the form of complete bliss without Maya. O subduer of the enemies. These are verses that come later in this chapter 9. O subduer of the enemies. At the time of creation, the Lord, by the power of his Chit Shakti, agitates Prakriti, made of the gunas, and creates Mahatattva. They say that this Mahatattva, the product of the three gunas, creates the universe with great variety. But this Mahatattva, by this Mahatattva, the universe is pervaded. And by this Mahatattva, the jiva takes birth. Just as from within himself the spider expands thread through his mouth, plays with it for some time, and eventually swallows it. Similarly, the Supreme Lord produces the universe and then withdraws it. Those are verses that are coming attractions for this chapter. So it's a philosophical explanation that is kind of the conclusion of knowledge and detachment, is attachment to the Supreme Lord. And how does it work? That's why these sections are within the Bhagavatam, although they're very complicated. At least for pea-brain people like me, that's quite complicated. For technology people, it's probably like, hey, yummy, but it's a little complicated. But the essence, how this moves that, and then it maintains, and then it's withdrawn. There's the remote controller, the Supreme. There was a very interesting event that took place in ISKCON history. The Bhaktivedanta Institute, there's probably others than the one I know about, but the Bhaktivedanta Institute invited a Nobel Prize winning scientist from California, from Berkeley, to take a sabbatical, his leave of absence from his teaching profession, go to Juhu, Bombay, and spend a month and a half, 2 months, whatever it was, studying Kapila's teachings on Sankhya philosophy, which is kind of the underpinnings of creation. Because to get creation, you have to have the stuff. You have to have upadan. You have to have the clay. So, and there's a source that from which all the clay comes, all the elements of creation. That's chapter 26 of Canto 3. And one thing unfolds into the next, unfolds into the next, and then the conclusion of the chapter is meditate upon the source and then engage in service to that source. Sankhya leads to meditation, leads to bhakti. That's chapter 26. So he spent some time, month and a half, whatever it was, and the story I heard from Rasraj, the man was really austere. I mean, he was up before the devotees were up. And he attended Mangalarti from his balcony. From where the Bhaktivedanta Institute, there's a balcony overseeing the temple. So he heard the kirtan, but he was already up, didn't wake him up. And, he spent the whole day, umpteen hours, whatever it is, 14 hours a day studying. And his assignment was, is there anything that you're aware of in empiric science today that would falsify statements from Sankhya philosophy? Doesn't prove it right, but is there something that just it can't be right because there's empiric science that says it can't be? And his conclusion was there's nothing in empiric science that says it can't be. And there's a little booklet, and it's published by the BI. I have a digital copy. Radhakrishna, remind me, and I'll send you a copy. And then you can forward it to whoever, how you forward things to your listening audience. But I'm sure you'll be interested. And he says lots of things. Besides, it's not falsifiable. He says this is interesting and that's interesting, and he, how scholars are. This connects with this finding, and that connects with that finding, and I'm going to bring this up at this stage because how do we know? There was the discussion yesterday evening was with Brandeis University, and they have a virtual bhakti club, right? Whatever they call it, some name. And that was the listening audience, and one of the persons unmuted himself and said, "I have a problem." What's that? I have a problem accepting the Vedas because maybe the Vedas are written by a human who's fallible. And I have problem accepting disciplic succession to explain the Vedas because there may be fallibility in the disciplic succession. So what do? I think I'm going to forward to him or to the person in charge of that bhakti club this PDF. And here's somebody who doesn't necessarily have faith in the Vedas. He has faith in empiric science. He's a scientist. That's where his faith goes. And there's nothing falsifiable within Sankhya, at least, for this professor. And he wasn't, Bhakta Henry Stapp. He's a scientist. He's answerable to his community, if you know what I mean. He has peers that review everything he writes. And, they're not going to like him to say there's nothing falsifiable in Sankhya philosophy. So he has to be careful with his peer group. So knowing that pressure is on one side, this young man, or any one of us, it doesn't prove it's right, but at least from the science perspective, it can't be established that it can't be right. It must be wrong. Or there's a fallible human behind it, compiling it. There's a doubt. I don't have faith, this young man was saying. Okay, so carrying on. By his independent Maya, of which time is a portion, he creates Mahatattva. Shruti says it. This is Mundaka Upanishad. Same metaphor. As a spider creates and then withdraws a web, as plants sprout from the earth, and as hairs grow from a man, so the material universe has come from the Lord. And the verses that we read, it's Dattatreya speaks the verse to Yadu. What Jiva Goswami does in his writing consistently is he'll take a verse, he makes a statement, Shishi Radha Nila Madhava Ki. It's his format or his methodology. He makes a statement, which, by the way, generally speaking, if not universally speaking, is a restatement in his own words of a message from Vedanta Sutra. It's a commentary on Vedanta Sutra hidden. He makes a statement, and then he supports the statement from the Bhagavatam. Then he explores some people that are doubters, the Purva-paksha folks. They say, well, wait a minute, what about this and what about that? And he brings it up and he addresses the what about this and what about that. And then they say, well, then they'll not like what I just said about it. They'll say such and such. And to this, I reply such and such. And then he makes his conclusion, which is pretty much the same as the initial statement. And then at the very end, he'll attribute who spoke the Bhagavatam verse. So the Bhagavatam verse that is being referred to is what we're reading from. Canto 11, chapter 9, verses 16 through 21. And Dattatreya, not a well-known incarnation of the Lord, but he's one of them, listed in the Bhagavatam, Canto 2, chapter 7. Dattatreya is a partial incarnation of Vishnu, who is the son of Atri and Anasuya. And he gave teachings. And according to Canto 2, chapter 7, his teachings were given to Prahlad and Yadu, King Haihaya, and others. There's not a lot of detail about what teachings did he give to this one, that one, what were the circumstances. But our acharyas, I have found, Jiva Goswami being one of them, consistently, although it says the Avadhuta Brahmana, they just say it's Dattatreya. And it's resting primarily upon that verse from the second canto, chapter 7, plus whatever other are the scriptural basis for their saying. The person speaking to King Yadu is Dattatreya. So you can't get better authority than that. He's an incarnation of Vishnu, or partial incarnation of Vishnu. And then from there, Jiva Goswami is taking resources from the Upanishads and from the Bhagavatam and from other places, Vedanta Sutra, directly explaining what we need to know about Paramatma, in this case, Paramatma, or the Vishnu form from whom the universe comes, and how it is maintained and how it's withdrawn, how it works, and then some of the steps and stages. It's all under his control. It's his energy. And it's Shakti Parinam. It's just transformation of his energy, so we can't call it false. But we understand that it's under his direction. It's meant for his pleasure, or that's the Krishna conscious perspective. It's meant for his pleasure. And so we don't have any business making it for our pleasure. It just leads to bhakti. And the obstacles, what's the biggest obstacle for bhakti? Ignorance. And we become accustomed to ignorance and become complacent as long as it doesn't hurt too much. When it hurts too much, then we call ouch and ask for God's help. But bhakti is meant for service, not for just getting relief from some problems. And the problems are caused by ignorance. So removal of the ignorance is the right solution. That's the Bhagavatam. That's why our acharyas and our founder acharya particularly so much wanted the world to receive Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. And then there's so many ways to do that, starting with distributing books, but then somehow following up so that people read the books, and then somehow following up so that they understand the books and they have relationships with the devotees that can address their doubts, like this young Brandeis University student, and so many others who will come across situations of life that are challenging to their faith, or not just situations that are challenging to their faith, just complacency and being a conditioned soul, and as long as it doesn't hurt, I'm okay, till it hurts again. Anyway, so that's the end of chapter 9, verse 16, and I guess tomorrow we'll move on to 17. It's kind of more of the same, not exactly the same, but we're dealing with an essential underpinning of Sambandha Gyan, like understanding what's the source of everything and everything's connection with the source, and how you navigate that in the mood of devotion. Okay, so we're ready for discussion if there's somebody that has comments or questions. All the way in the back.
About the complacency, that one of the partisans on our morning japa group, he texts me, I don't want to identify the person, that I'm going to get the COVID-19 shot. So maybe it might be that I may be not able to attend the morning, just to inform you. So I was just thinking that while you are giving your mind a chance, that it would be difficult to join. Why can't you think, no matter what it is, I'm going to join? Then it will happen. But you are giving already a chance to your mind that maybe I may be not able to. So this is how this, I always remember the Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj, that when we wake up in the morning, we should bang our mind 100 times with the shoes to remind that this is the goal of life. No matter what it happened, we should stick with it. So it was a wonderful example yesterday you give, was very touching to me, that to really remain live, even the devotional life, is to stay with some personalities. Like you give the example of the wood, wet wood. If it stay near the fire, then automatically the wetness will be removed and one day they catch up the fire. So we are in that complexes mood. So it's very difficult, Maharaj. Any suggestions?
It's it's part of, or it's preliminary to, Maya's trap. If you send me a reminder, I'll send you a little nice section from one of Shivaram Maharaj's writing, where instead of using complacency, he uses the word indifference. And the indifference is kind of like a neutral zone. It's not like averse to Krishna, dvesha, raga, dvesha. It's this, transit lounge between the spiritual and the material, indifference or complacency. And naturally, in that space of indifference or complacency, there's the attraction for the temporary. That's, distracted japa or distracted bhakti. We're doing something with sincere effort. But the purpose that started that sincere effort goes into the background because now we're feeling comfortable. We become complacent or indifferent. And then the distraction comes. So it's essential to go further in the bhakti process is, one way is the shoes, but another way is the sense of purpose. Gratitude is a real powerful motivator to go forward. But gratitude towards what? And, so it's a cognizant, it's of becoming aware of life's mission or the mercy that's being presented to us by what we're complacent or indifferent towards. Mercy in the form of the holy name and the Bhagavatam and devotee association, the deities, the Dham, that all those things that are spiritual. Doing the things that are spiritual in a mood of indifference or complacency invites distraction. That's an offense. If we come, so we don't want to go there. We have to want to not go there. So the banging the head or gratitude or good association, etc. We need to make conscious choices in the direction of transcendence. Complacency is very problematic. Something else.
Also, Maharaj, you made a wonderful point that if we relate everything to Krishna, who is the creator, then everything happens by the will of Lord. And if we accept that fact and live in that mood, then even though we are living in the material world, you can remain like in a Vrindavan Dham, because you see everything related to Krishna. And everybody is working under the direction of Krishna. If we can accept, like you made the wonderful point.
I just went editing to what you said.
Yes, Maharaj.
Sanction instead of the will. Because bad stuff happens by sanction, not by will. Otherwise, we get the picture of a mean God with a stick in his hand whacking people. The vengeful God. But sanction. Anything else? Yes, go ahead.
To add to that, actually, what was just being discussed, we were reading in the Srimad Bhagavatam last night, and Prabhupada was saying in one of his purports that Maharaj Parikshit, he was instructed by Shukadev Goswami to actually meditate on the universal form of the Lord.
Ah,
And he was saying that even though that meditation is actually material, because he was thinking about it in relation to Krishna, it was actually spiritual activity.
very good. Very good. Very good. That was 3 times. Because there are things in this world that are seen as not connected to Krishna. So to see the connection with Krishna brings the spiritual dimension to those things, which is very similar to what Shyam Sundar had to say. You know, it's not this identical, but it's very similar. And so there's a lot about the universal form, and it's a puzzling feature of the Lord, isn't it? Start to drill down on the universal form, and your mind's going to spin. It's not easy to understand. And there's multiple dimensions and features of the universal form. There's this one, there's that one, there's the other one, there's another one, there's the other one. Wait a minute, which one is it? And it's all of them, and they're different features of that universal form without listing the different features. So what's behind it? It's to see that which is bewildering to us anyways, so that we can understand what's behind it. And then be detached from it while contemplating what's behind it. But it starts with the contemplation. Okay. There's something online over here.
Question from Shriya Devi Dasi. Could you please explain the difference between Mahatattva and Prakriti? I was thinking both are the same.
I was thinking,
Both are the same. Mahatattva
yeah,
and Prakriti.
okay. This is a question that came up yesterday and a question that came after class yesterday. And the topic that the response is, these are different names for the same entity, just focusing on a particular aspect of that same entity. Entity is Bhaktisiddhanta's word. You can say thing, but he uses the word entity. So it's material nature, that's the English. Prakriti is describing the that which is to be enjoyed by Purusha. That's the thrust of the word Prakriti, material nature. And Mahatattva is indicating a particular stage or aspect or feature of the process of creation that is specifically Mahatattva is the 24 elements in their differentiated state. There's 24 elements that make up the Mahatattva. Mahatattva is the 24 elements in the differentiated state. And you can say, well, that's Prakriti. And that's also right. It's Prakriti. There's 24 elements of Prakriti. But specifically, Mahatattva indicates that feature of Prakriti that's involved in the stage of creation. And then it's those 24 elements that undergo parinama or transformation. And then sometimes the transformation looks like this, and we call it, a cat. And sometimes it looks like that, and it's, the stars in the sky. So but it's Mahatattva, and it's different transformations of states. But the building blocks, it's like, look around the temple, and there's different materials. And so the people that built the temple, the engineers and architects and developers and all those people, they have a big box, and inside the box is all the elements that make up what's around the temple room. And some persons, Shamsundra and others, decide we want this type or that type and the other type. And so here we have it, the temple. But so there's the temple, and it's just 24 elements mixed. That's Mahatattva. We can say it's Prakriti. We can say it's Prakriti. We can say it's Mahatattva. It's Mahatattva. We can say it's a temple because it's used in Krishna service. So it depends on the perspective. They're the same, but they're different. The terminology indicates a particular feature of the same entity.
Next question is from Uttam Bhaktadas. Vaishnava literature and Srila Prabhupada use the word dream in relation to the material world. Is it used in terms of really distinct of
What?
is it used in terms of reality distinct from absolute reality, like a drama? Often dream is taken as a synonym with false existence.
Yeah. Similar answer to the previous answer. Dreams exist, but they're temporary. And the dream object or events are different than the wake objects and events, and both of them are in the category of illusion or vivarta in this sense. But they're not false. The dream is not false. What you experience in a dream is a reworking in the mind of something you experience when you're awake. That Prabhupada made that very clear. You cannot dream of something you haven't experienced. Dreams are simply a mix of something you've experienced taken from here and there. He gives the example of a golden mountain. Somewhere there's gold, somewhere there's a mountain, your dream is a golden mountain. No such thing. Well, Sumero. But a golden mountain in your dream doesn't exist, it's just in your dream. So is it false? Is it absolutely? This is this Mayavad idea. As that is false, so this world is also false because all there is Brahman, and it's just like a dream, it's false. It just doesn't exist. The Vaishnava understanding is it exists, but it exists in your consciousness, but your consciousness is, it was touched on yesterday specifically. So, the essence of his question seems to be, and if I've got it wrong, you can correct me because you read the question. The Prabhupada would speak of dreams in different ways at different times, depending upon a point he was trying to make. The bottom line is, a dream is not false. It appears to be something, but it's not even exactly what it appears to be, but it exists. It's not false. Here's an example. Supposing in a dream you're being chased by a tiger and you scream, ah! And when you wake up, you're perspiring, your heart is beating. And so the tiger was just in the dream, and the perspiration and the palpitations of heart are something you experience on a physical plane, not just in the dream. So there's a connection between the dream and your physical condition. So now what about when you actually see a tiger and you perspire and you scream? Is one of them false, just literally absolutely false, or is it not what it appears to be? So what you experience in a dream has some correlation with what you experience in what your wake state, and they're not identical. Both of them are temporary. They're illusory in the sense that they're temporary, but they're not literally false. So I hope that helps in his question. If he has more, he can send in refinement of his question. Anything else? Yeah.
Next question is from Girivaradaridas. In today's teachings, I heard pradhan to be subtle, an analogy provided is clay.
Pradhan is subtle
An analogy provided is clay.
and in what?
Analogy.
Analogy?
Analogy.
Analogy?
Provided is clay.
Okay.
How do we understand?
How to not understand? It's not, it's because it's subtle doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It exists. Can you see things that are subtle? No. Does that mean they don't exist? Doesn't mean they don't exist. They exist. And then you can bring the subtle into a gross. Especially if you're Vishnu. It's not a problem. That's it.
No,
There's more. Go ahead.
next question is from Sneha Vali Devidasi. The statement Mahatattva is composed of knowledge. Is this statement equalizing knowledge to the knowledge of the material elements?
Yes. Yes. Very good.
If not, then how can we explain 24 material elements?
Okay.
False ego.
It's not a knot, so keep going. Next.
Next question is from Amara Devi Dasi.
Okay.
Practical consideration are also part of service.
What is?
Practical considerations
Practical consideration. Yeah.
are also part of service. Then while taking care of practical aspects, why the mind feels like it's getting away from Krishna?
Why does the mind stay away from Krishna when there's practical things to do? That's the question. Go ask your mind. Rebellious. Why are you being rebellious? That's why. It's the soul's misuse of free will. It's the rebellious spirit of the soul. Raga and dvesha. That's why the mind just reflects that. Misuse of free will. Why misuse free will? It doesn't make sense. You're not becoming happy and you won't get practical things done. That's the mind. It's very irrational. Mind behaves very irrationally sometimes. Go ahead, next. That's it. In the room, anything? Srila Prabhupada ki? Jai.